Commander Dae Kim stood on the bridge of the UES horizon and watched the stars drift past the view screen. He had been in space for 6 years now. Ever since Earth joined the Galactic Assembly, the Assembly was a collection of alien races that controlled most of the known galaxy. Humans were the newest members, and everyone treated them like children who needed to learn how things worked. Dae didn't mind most days. The aliens were strange but not hostile. The Rithari looked like tall birds with 4 arms. The Quenics were blob-like creatures that communicated through color changes. The Valthene were the ones that made him uncomfortable. They looked like giant insects, with hard shells and too many legs. But they were powerful. Controlling 12 star systems near human space, his communicator buzzed. It was Ambassador Hana Park, calling from the assembly station. "Dae, we have a problem," Hana said. Her face appeared on his screen, and she looked tired. "The Valthene are making demands about Ember Colony." Ember Colony was humanity's pride. Located in the new Pyongyang system, it had been settled 8 years ago. Now 2.4 million humans lived there, growing food that fed half the human colonies. The planet was beautiful, with blue oceans and green continents. It had one moon, rich with phosphate minerals that made the soil perfect for farming. "What kind of demands?" Dae asked. "They want the moon. They claim their ancestors owned it 5,000 years ago, before they left the system." Hana rubbed her eyes. "They're saying we stole their property." Dae felt his jaw tighten. "That's insane. The system was empty when we arrived. We checked all the records." "I know. I'm presenting our case to the Assembly Council tomorrow. We have every legal document proving we settled legitimately." Hana paused. "But Dae..." The Valthene ambassador was smiling when he made the demand. "I don't like it." The next day, Dae watched the assembly proceedings on his screen. Hana stood before the council, a semicircle of aliens representing 15 different species. She presented maps, surveys, and legal documents. Everything proved that humans had followed every rule when settling Ember Colony. The Valthene ambassador, a creature named Thex, made his case. He showed ancient star charts and claimed Valthene DNA markers in the moon's soil. But his evidence looked weak compared to Hana's documentation. After 6 hours of debate, the council voted. 9 species voted for humanity. 5 voted for the Valthene. 1 abstained. "The council finds in favor of Earth," the Rithari chairman announced. "Ember Colony and its moon remain under human jurisdiction." Hana bowed respectfully. But Dae saw the Valthene ambassador's expression. The alien wasn't upset. He looked satisfied, like everything was going according to plan. 3 days later, Dae was reviewing supply reports when the communication system exploded with noise. "Emergency transmission from Ember Colony," his communications officer shouted. Dr. Yuna Che's face appeared on screen. She was a xenobiologist. Dae had met once at a conference. Now her face was covered in blood, and behind her, something was burning. "They're attacking!" The Valthene fleet just... The transmission cut to static, then returned. "Burning everything. The orbital stations are gone. They're hitting the cities. Oh God, the children." The screen went black. "Get me a connection," Dae ordered. "Any channel." "I'm trying, sir." "All frequencies are dead." Dae's hands gripped the edge of his console. "Launch reconnaissance drones. I want eyes on that system now." "Sir, that's 4 hours away at drone speed." "Do it." The next 4 hours were the longest of Dae's life. He sent messages to Earth, to the other colonies, to the assembly station. Everyone was trying to reach Ember Colony. No one could get through. When the drone footage finally arrived, Dae felt his stomach turn to ice. Ember Colony's capital city, New Seoul, was gone. Where 2 million people had lived, there was now a crater of melted glass. The other cities showed the same destruction. The orbital stations were debris fields. The moon's mining facilities had been reduced to scattered atoms. The drone's sensors detected no life signs, none. On a planet that had been home to 2.4 million humans just hours ago, there was now only silence. Day pulled up the tactical analysis. Orbital bombardment signatures were everywhere. The Valthene had used their entire fleet, hitting every settlement simultaneously. The attack had lasted 47 minutes. In less than an hour, they had erased an entire human world. His second officer was vomiting in a waste bin. His communications officer was crying quietly at her station. Day wanted to do both, but he was the commander. He had to think. "Send this footage to Earth immediately," he said. His voice sounded hollow to his own ears. "Mark it Priority Alpha. And send it to Ambassador Park at the assembly station." "Sir, what do we do?" Day looked at the images of the dead world on his screen. Somewhere in those ruins were people he had known. Colleagues. Friends. Doctor. Yuna had probably died screaming into that last transmission. "We wait for orders from Earth," he said. "And we remember." At the assembly station, Hana Park received the footage at the same time as the council members. She watched it alone in her quarters, her hands shaking. When it finished, she sat in darkness for a long time. The Valthene had waited 3 days after losing the council vote. Just long enough for it to look like a separate incident. Just long enough to have deniability. They had killed 2.4 million humans because they didn't get their way. Hana's communicator buzzed. It was a message from the Rithari chairman, requesting her presence at an emergency council session in 1 hour. She stood up, washed her face, and put on her formal ambassador's uniform. When she looked in the mirror, she barely recognized herself. The woman looking back had lost something in the last few hours. Some kind of innocence, maybe. Or hope. She walked to the council chambers, and her footsteps echoed in the empty corridor. When she arrived, all the ambassadors were already there. They looked uncomfortable, avoiding her eyes. The Rithari chairman spoke first. "Ambassador Park, we have reviewed the incident at Ember Colony. We extend our deepest sympathies." Hana said nothing. The Valthene ambassador Thex stood. "The Valthene Empire wishes to clarify that this was a tragic accident. During a defensive military exercise in the region, several missiles malfunctioned. We deeply regret the loss of life." "An accident," Hana repeated. Her voice was flat. "Yes, we are prepared to offer compensation." 2.4 million people," Hana interrupted. "Men, women, children." In 47 minutes, the chamber fell silent. "We are prepared," Thex continued, "to offer mining rights to the Kepler asteroid field as compensation. Its value is..." "How much?" Hana asked. "The estimated worth is approximately 15 billion credits." Hana did the math in her head. That was about 6,000 credits per human life. The cost of a used transport vehicle. She looked around the chamber at the alien faces. Some looked sympathetic. Most looked uncomfortable. None looked angry. And she understood. This wasn't new to them. This was just how things were done. "I see," she said quietly. "Thank you, Chairman. I need to consult with Earth before responding." She left the chamber and went straight to her quarters. Then she sent a single message to Earth. To President Sung Huang. "They think we'll accept money for our dead. What are your orders?" The response came 6 hours later. Just 2 words. "Come home." The assembly chamber was packed 3 weeks after the Ember massacre. That's what everyone was calling it now. Not an accident. Not an incident. A massacre. Hana Park stood at the human delegation podium, looking out at the assembled alien races. Behind her stood President Sung Huang, who had traveled from Earth for this session. Beside him was Admiral Jin Quan, commander of Earth's defense forces. The admiral wore his full military uniform. Every medal displayed. "This emergency session will now begin," the Rithari chairman announced. "The human delegation has requested a formal investigation into the Ember Colony incident." Hana stepped forward. She had spent 3 weeks preparing for this moment. 3 weeks of barely sleeping, of reviewing footage of the massacre over and over, of reading every law and treaty the Assembly had ever written. "Members of the Council," she began, We are not here to request an investigation. We are here to demand justice. The Valthene Empire deliberately destroyed Ember Colony in retaliation for losing a legal dispute. This was not an accident. This was genocide. Murmurs rippled through the chamber. The word genocide seemed to make several ambassadors uncomfortable. The Valthene ambassador Thex stood. The human delegation is overwrought with grief. We understand. But accusations of genocide are serious and unfounded. Unfounded? Hana pulled up a holographic display. Your fleet arrived in attack formation. You struck every settlement simultaneously. You targeted civilian population centers first, then infrastructure. Your bombardment was precise and thorough. Our analysis shows you spent 47 minutes ensuring no one survived. The display showed the attack pattern. It was methodical, efficient, and utterly brutal. A malfunction in our targeting systems, Thex began. Your entire fleet had the same malfunction at the same time? Hana's voice remained calm, but everyone could hear the ice beneath it. 23 warships, all malfunctioning identically. The Quenix ambassador, a large blue blob, flickered colors that meant discomfort. Ambassador Park. Perhaps we should discuss appropriate compensation. We don't want compensation, President Sung said, standing. We want justice. We want the Valthene officers responsible for this attack to stand trial. The chamber erupted in shocked, chittering, buzzing, and color changes. An alien ambassador in the back called out, "That's not how things are done." The referee chairman waited for silence. President Huang, the assembly has procedures for such disputes. Economic sanctions, trade restrictions, perhaps reparations. But demanding criminal trials of another species' military officers is unprecedented. Unprecedented. Hana felt something cold settle in her chest. How many times has this happened before? I'm sorry? The chairman asked. How many times has a species in this assembly committed genocide and gotten away with economic sanctions? The silence that followed was answer enough. Hana spent the next 2 days in the assembly's data archives. What she found made her sick. In the last 1,000 years, there had been 247 documented cases of one assembly species destroying another species' colony or population. The responses varied. Economic sanctions, trade restrictions, stern diplomatic letters. In 3 cases, the aggressor species was temporarily suspended from council votes. Not one species had ever faced military intervention. Not one leader had ever stood trial. The pattern was clear. The older, more powerful species occasionally wiped out younger species' colonies. The assembly expressed concern, imposed some economic penalties, and everyone moved on. It was business as usual. She found 14 cases similar to Ember. Colonies destroyed after legal disputes. The compensation offered was always less than the cost of rebuilding, and far less than the value of lives lost. Captain Mina Seo found Hana in the archives at 3 in the morning. Mina was a Special Forces commander who had volunteered to join the delegation. Her younger sister had lived on Ember Colony, had taught music to children there. Ambassador, Mina said quietly. You need to see this. She handed Hana a datapad. It showed intercepted communications between several assembly species. The Horth ambassador writing to the Quenix, "Let the humans have their emotional moment. They'll accept the settlement once they understand how things work." The Rithari chairman writing to his home world, "Young species always react dramatically to their first real loss. They learn to be pragmatic eventually." Everyone. The Authorus Lashment. Actually, the Valthene Emperor's message to his fleet commander, well executed. The humans will bluster, but the assembly won't risk trade disruptions over this. Hana read them all twice. Then she stood up and walked to President Sung's quarters. Admiral Jin was already there. They had been waiting for her. They think we're going to accept this, Hana said without preamble. They think we're going to take their money and move on. I know, President Sung said. He looked older than he had 3 weeks ago. I've been reading the same files. So what do we do? Mina asked. Admiral Jin placed a data chip on the table. I received this yesterday from Earth. It's the results of a planetary referendum. Should Earth accept the Assembly's settlement offer? 93% of humans voted no. What did they vote yes for? Hannah asked. The Admiral's expression was grim. The question was multiple choice. 93% voted for option 3. Reject the settlement and withdraw from the Galactic Assembly until justice is served. President Sung nodded. We're calling all humans home. Every scientist. Every diplomat. Every trader. We're pulling out of assembly space completely. They won't care, Hannah said. They've seen species rage and withdraw before. They wait a generation, and the species comes back with its tail between its legs. I know, the president said, but we're not planning to wait a generation. He gestured to Admiral Jin, who activated a holographic display. It showed Earth's military assets, 50 warships, 300 smaller vessels, and the 12 colony defense fleets. We're not strong enough to fight the Valthene directly, the Admiral explained. Their empire has 200 warships and controls 12 systems. But we don't need to be strong enough to win. We need to be strong enough to make them hurt. Right, Mina leaned forward. Are we talking about war? We're talking about justice, President Sung said. The Assembly won't provide it, so we will. The formal vote came 2 days later. The Galactic Assembly gathered to vote on the Ember Colony settlement proposal. The Valthene would pay 15 billion credits in mining rights. The incident would be closed. Hannah stood at the podium. Every camera in the galaxy was pointed at her. Every species was watching to see if the young humans would accept their place in the order of things. Does the human delegation accept the proposed settlement? The Rathari chairman asked. Hannah looked at the Valthene ambassador. Thex was barely hiding his satisfaction. No, Hannah said clearly. We do not accept your compensation. We do not accept your version of justice. And we do not accept a system that treats genocide as a regulatory violation. The chamber erupted in noise. Ambassador Park, please reconsider, the chairman began. We're done reconsidering, President Sung said, standing. We came to this assembly in good faith. We followed your rules, we believed in your system, and when one of your member species murdered 2.4 million of our people, you offered us money and told us to get over it. Admiral Jin activated his communicator. All human vessels, this is Admiral Quan, execute withdrawal protocol. We're going home. Across assembly space, human ships began departing. Scientists left research stations. Diplomats closed embassies. Traders loaded their cargo and turned toward Earth. The Rathari chairman looked alarmed. President Huang, this is an overreaction. If you withdraw from the assembly, Earth will lose all the benefits of membership. Trade agreements, defense pacts, scientific exchanges. We'll survive, President Sung said. Humanity survived for 300,000 years before we met you. We'll figure it out. Hannah gathered her documents and prepared to leave the chamber. The Valthene ambassador called out, You're making a mistake, humans. You need the assembly more than it needs you. Hannah stopped and turned. Ambassador Thex, I spent 3 weeks in your archives. I learned something important. Do you know what the older species call us in their private messages? The tantrum species. They think we're children who'll come crying back to them within a generation. She smiled, but there was no warmth in it. You're about to learn something about humans. When you hurt us, we don't forgive. We don't forget. We just get quiet while we figure out how to hurt you back. She walked out of the chamber. President Sung and Admiral Jin followed. Behind them, the assembly ambassadors were already discussing trade routes and treaty adjustments, confident the humans would return within a few years. On the UES horizon, Commander Dae Kim received Admiral Jin's orders. They were encrypted with the highest security clearance. He read them twice, to make sure he understood. All vessels, set course for Earth, he announced to his crew. We're going home. His second officer looked confused. For how long, sir? Day thought about the orders he'd just read. Protocol reversion. It was a contingency plan he'd heard rumors about but never thought he'd see activated. As long as it takes, he said. 6 months after Ember Colony died, the galaxy had mostly forgotten about the humans. The Assembly continued its meetings. Trade routes adjusted to bypass human space. A few species expressed mild curiosity about where all the humans had gone. But no one investigated too closely. The Valthene Empire expanded into 3 star systems that humans had previously controlled. Their ships patrolled freely through space that had once seen human traders. Ambassador Thex sent occasional messages to Earth, offering to reopen negotiations. None received replies. In the Rethari Council chambers, an aide asked the chairman, "Should we be concerned about the human silence?" The chairman, whose name was Kelrix, made a gesture that meant dismissal. Young species always sulk when they first encounter real galactic politics. They'll return within a decade, more willing to cooperate. It always happens this way. What the Assembly didn't know was that humanity hadn't been sulking. They had been working. Admiral Jin Quan stood in a bunker deep beneath Earth's surface and looked at the assembled commanders. There were 50 of them, representing every branch of human military. This was the Dark Fleet Command, a force that officially didn't exist. "Status report," Jin said. Commander Dae Kim stepped forward. He had been promoted twice in the last 6 months, now commanding an entire battle group. Fleet readiness is at 97%. All vessels have been retrofitted with the new systems. Crews are trained and ready. Captain Minaseo went next. Special operations teams have completed insertion training. We have 17 units ready for deployment. Each unit is capable of independent operation for up to 3 months. Agent Tae Yoon, an intelligence officer, activated a holographic display. Our surveillance network is operational. We have monitoring stations in 73 Valthene systems. All major military installations are being tracked. Engineer Wuhan was last. He looked tired but satisfied. The weapon systems are complete and tested. All production targets have been met. Admiral Jin nodded. Good. The President has approved final authorization. We begin operations in 48 hours. He pulled up a star map showing Valthene territory. Our objective is not occupation. It's not territory. It's justice. The Valthene Empire murdered 2.4 million humans and faced no consequences. We're going to be their consequences. The room was silent. Everyone knew what was coming. Jin continued. Before we joined the Assembly, we reviewed their weapons treaties. We signed documents promising not to use certain technologies. Kinetic bombardment weapons, self-replicating hunter systems, biological agents, AI-guided weapons. The Assembly banned these things 10,000 years ago. He paused. We're not in the Assembly anymore. Wuhan stepped forward to explain. He was a small man with glasses, the kind of person you'd expect to see in a laboratory, not a war room. But he had spent 6 months designing weapons that would make the galaxy remember humanity. The Assembly's treaties are based on their moral codes, Wu explained. They believe certain weapons are too terrible to use, too efficient, too brutal. He smiled grimly. But humans have different ideas about morality. We think genocide is too terrible to ignore. He activated displays showing the new weapons. Orbital kinetic weapons. Simple concept. Drop a heavy object from orbit. No explosives needed. Gravity does the work. Cheap, effective, and completely unstoppable by standard shields. Another display. Hunter-killer swarms. Millions of small drones, each one capable of identifying and destroying targets. They learn from each other. They adapt. Once released, they don't stop until they run out of targets or power. A third display showed biological containers. Targeted biological agents. We took samples of Valthene biology during the trade years. These agents attack their immune systems, specifically, non-lethal but incapacitating. We can disable their military without killing civilians. The final display made several commanders look uncomfortable. It showed colony ships, but modified heavily. Planet cracker missiles. We gutted 12 colony ships, and filled them with enough explosive power to crack a planet's crust. If we need a deterrent that makes them think twice about revenge, this is it. Captain Mina spoke up. These weapons are illegal under assembly law. Assembly law doesn't apply to us anymore, Admiral Jin said. And the Valthene proved that assembly law is meaningless anyway. They broke it when they destroyed Ember. The only law that matters now is the one we enforce ourselves. Agent Tae-yoon had been busy during the 6 months of silence. He was an expert in infiltration and psychological operations. While the assembly thought humans were hiding, Tae had been traveling through Valthene space. He had planted monitoring devices on 73 worlds. Small things, disguised as space debris or old satellites, they watched troop movements, recorded military communications, and mapped defensive installations. He had also spread rumors, false stories about human surrender. Whispers that Earth was preparing to apologize. The Valthene military had relaxed, confident the threat was over. Tae's final mission had been the most dangerous. He had infiltrated a Valthene military academy and accessed their strategic planning database. Now humanity knew exactly where every Valthene warship was stationed, where their ammunition depots were, where their command centers operated. The Valthene thought their empire was secure. Tae had given humanity the keys to burn it down. Captain Mina prepared her Marines for the operations ahead. These weren't ordinary soldiers. Each one had volunteered specifically for this mission. Each one had lost someone on Ember Colony. Mina's briefing was direct. We're not conquerors. We're not occupiers. We're here to deliver justice. That means we follow strict rules of engagement. She displayed images of Valthene civilians. Workers. Families. Children. These are not our enemies. Our enemies are their military and their government. Anyone who attacks us is a valid target. Anyone who doesn't, we leave alone. One Marine raised his hand. Ma'am, what if they attack us from civilian areas? Then we evacuate the civilians first, Mina said firmly. I know what you're thinking. Why should we show mercy when they showed us none? Because that's what separates us from them. We're not here to become what they are. She paused, looking at each face. My sister died on Ember. She was a music teacher. 28 years old. She died screaming while Valthene missiles burned her classroom. I want revenge as much as any of you. But revenge isn't justice. Justice means punishing the guilty and protecting the innocent. The Marines nodded. They understood. 17 fleets moved silently through the void between stars. Each fleet was positioned near a different Valthene system. They used new stealth technology. Another benefit of abandoning assembly treaties, their ships were invisible to standard sensors. Commander Day stood on the bridge of the UES Retribution, the flagship of Battle Group 7. His target was Valthene Prime, the Empire's capital world. It was the most heavily defended system in their space. All ships report ready, his tactical officer said. Waiting for your command. Day thought about Dr. Yuna Che, the xenobiologist who had screamed for help during the Ember massacre. He thought about all the people he'd never meet, the children who'd never grow up, the futures that had been stolen. Send message to all battle groups, he said. Commence Operation Wildfire in 10 minutes. Across Valthene space, 17 human fleets received the same message. Thousands of soldiers, hundreds of ships, all preparing to strike simultaneously. Admiral Jin broadcast from Earth on all frequencies, in every known language. This is Admiral Jin Kwan, of the United Earth Defense Forces. At this moment, human military units are positioned around 43 Valthene systems. In 10 minutes, we will begin operations to dismantle the Valthene Empire's military capability. The broadcast reached the assembly within minutes. Kelrix, the Rathari chairman, immediately tried to contact Earth. This is an act of war. This violates every treaty. We're not in your assembly, Jin replied calmly. Your treaties don't bind us. You had your chance to provide justice through civilized means. You chose compensation over consequences. Now we'll provide consequences ourselves. You'll start a galactic war, Kelrix protested. No, Jin said. We'll finish one. The Valtheans started this war when they burned Ember Colony. We're just responding 6 months late. The transmission ended. Jin looked at the countdown timer. 5 minutes. He thought about President Sung's final orders. Make them remember what happens when you hurt humans. But make them remember, we could have been worse. The assembly thought humans were primitive, violent, uncivilized. They were about to learn that humans could be all those things and still show more mercy than the civilized galaxy ever had. The timer reached 0. Across Valthene space, 17 fleets dropped their stealth fields and began firing. The Valthene defense grid around their capital world was considered impenetrable. 40 orbital stations, each armed with enough firepower to destroy a small fleet, 200 defensive satellites creating overlapping fields of fire, 3 full battle fleets stationed in close orbit. Commander Day watched as his fleet dropped out of stealth just outside the defense perimeter. The Valthene sensors detected them immediately. Alarms began screaming across every Valthene military channel. Sir, they're powering weapons, his tactical officer reported. They're hailing us, demanding we surrender. Ignore them, Day said. Launch kinetic strikes. Target all orbital defenses. From the human ships, thousands of tungsten rods launched. They were simple weapons. Just heavy metal cylinders. No engines. No guidance systems after initial launch. Just mass and velocity. The assembly had banned them because they were impossible to stop. Shields could deflect energy weapons. But simple physics was harder to fool. The rods hit the orbital stations at incredible speeds. The first station exploded. Then the second. Then the third. Within 90 seconds, all 40 stations were debris clouds. The defensive satellites tried to respond, but the human hunter-killer swarms were already among them. Millions of tiny drones, each one smart enough to find and destroy a target. The satellites tried to shoot them down, but there were too many. For every drone destroyed, 10 more took its position. The Valthene battle fleets moved to engage, but they were using old tactics against new weapons. Human missiles didn't follow predictable flight paths. They dodged, weaved, and learned from each near miss. Valthene point defenses shot down dozens, but hundreds got through. In 15 minutes, the impenetrable defense grid was gone. The Valthene capital world lay exposed. Similar scenes played out across 43 Valthene systems simultaneously. Orbital defenses that had stood for centuries fell in minutes. Battle fleets that had never known defeat found themselves overwhelmed by weapons they'd never encountered. On Valthene Prime, the military command center was in chaos. General Crix, the Empire's supreme commander, watched his tactical displays fill with red warning symbols. How is this possible? He demanded. These weapons shouldn't exist. The assembly banned them. His aide's voice trembled. Sir, the humans aren't in the assembly anymore. They're using pre-ban technology. Then deploy our fleet reserves. Every ship we have. Sir, our fleet reserves are gone. The humans hit every military installation simultaneously. We've lost 70% of our naval capacity in the first hour. Crix felt his legs weaken. An hour ago, the Valthene Empire had been one of the most powerful forces in the galaxy. Now, they were helpless. A transmission came through on all channels. It was broadcasting in Valthene, human, and every major assembly language. Crix recognized the voice from intelligence briefings. It was Ambassador Hannah Park, the human who had argued before the Council 6 months ago. This is Ambassador Hannah Park, speaking for the United Earth government. To the Valthene Empire, we deliver this message. This is not war. This is justice. Croup. End quote. Active video. End quote. The transmission showed footage of Ember Colony burning. Every screen in the Valthene command center displayed it. The massacre played out again. Every terrible minute. 6 months ago, you destroyed Ember Colony. You murdered 2.4 million humans because you lost a legal dispute. The Galactic Assembly offered you no consequences. They expected us to accept payment and move on. The footage switched to show human fleets in battle. We are not the Galactic Assembly. We do not accept genocide as business as usual. We do not offer compensation for mass murder. We offer justice. Crix waited for the terms of surrender. The demand for territory, resources, submission. It never came. Instead, Hana said something that confused him. We are not here to destroy your civilization. We are here to destroy your ability to hurt others. Surrender your military forces, and your civilians will not be harmed. Resist, and we will dismantle every weapon you have. Captain Mina Seo led her Marines down to Valthene Prime's surface. Her mission was to secure the capital city and the government district. Intelligence suggested this would be the most heavily defended target. Her dropships landed on the outskirts of the city. The Valthene military had set up defensive positions throughout the urban area. Mina had expected that. What she hadn't expected was how terrified they were. The first Valthene soldiers her Marines encountered dropped their weapons immediately. They had heard about the orbital strikes. They had watched their supposedly invincible defenses fall in minutes. They wanted no part of fighting these humans. But some fought. Hardened soldiers who believed in their empire. Mina's Marines engaged them in fierce firefights through the city streets. The Valthene were brave and skilled, but they were using standard assembly tactics against an enemy who had studied every battle the assembly had ever fought. The Marines used drones to scout ahead. They used small hunter-killers to clear enemy positions. They used jamming technology to blind Valthene sensors. Every advantage that the assembly had banned for being unsporting, the humans used without hesitation. But Mina had been clear about the rules. When her Marines secured the government district, they found thousands of Valthene civilians sheltering in the buildings. Workers, families, people who had nothing to do with the military, set up a perimeter, Mina ordered. Anyone who wants to leave, let them. Anyone who stays gets food and medical attention. No one gets hurt unless they attack us. One of her Marines looked confused. Ma'am, they're the enemy. No, Mina corrected. Their government is the enemy. Their military is the enemy. These people are just scared civilians. We're here to punish the guilty, not everyone who happened to be born Valthene. Word spread quickly through the city. The humans were destroying military targets but leaving civilians alone. They were even providing medical care to Valthene wounded. This wasn't the behavior of conquerors or genocidal invaders. It was something the Valthene had never seen before. Justice that distinguished between the guilty and the innocent. Commander Day received a priority transmission. A Valthene dreadnought was attempting to flee the system. Intelligence identified it as the Imperial Royal Carrier, carrying the Valthene Emperor's family and the royal brood. Intercept course, Day ordered. Don't let them jump to hyperspace. His fleet moved to cut off the dreadnought's escape route. The huge ship was armed but didn't fire. It just tried to run. Day's weapons officer asked, "Sir, do we destroy it?" Day thought about it. Aboard that ship were the leaders of the empire that had destroyed Ember Colony. Killing them would be easy. It would be satisfying. It would be what they deserved, but it would also make humanity no better than the Valthene. Hail them, Day ordered. The Valthene Emperor himself appeared on screen. He was an old male. His carapace dulled with age. He looked terrified. "Human commander," the Emperor said. "I surrender. Please spare my family. They had nothing to do with the attack on your colony. Your generals gave the orders," Day said. "Your fleet carried them out. Where was this concern for families when you burned Ember Colony?" The Emperor had no answer. Day continued. "Your dreadnought is free to leave this system. Take your family and flee. But know this. You're only alive because we chose mercy. You're only free because we're better than you. Tell anyone who will listen what happens when you murder human civilians." He cut the transmission. The dreadnought was allowed to jump to hyperspace. Day's second officer looked shocked. "Sir, we just let them go." "Yes," Day said. "Because we're not here to commit genocide. We're here to stop it from happening again." The battle for Valthene space lasted 72 hours. In that time, humanity destroyed 97% of the Valthene fleet. Every orbital station was dismantled, every military headquarters was captured or destroyed. The Empire's ability to wage war was reduced to nothing, but the Valthene civilian population was largely untouched. Human forces had been surgical, targeting only military assets and government infrastructure. Where civilians were caught in combat zones, humans had evacuated them first. The assembly watched in horror and confusion. This wasn't how wars were supposed to be fought. You either conquered completely or you negotiated. You didn't destroy an empire's military while carefully protecting its civilians. On the third day, Admiral Jin broadcast again. The Valthene Empire's military has been neutralized. We are withdrawing all human forces from Valthene space. We are not occupying. We are not annexing territory. We are not enslaving populations. The assembly channels exploded with chatter. This made no sense. Jin continued. To the survivors of the Valthene Empire, rebuild. Learn from this. And pray you never see us again. Because if any species in this galaxy commits genocide again, if any species decides that mass murder is acceptable, we will return. And next time, we won't be so gentle. He paused. To the Galactic Assembly, you built a system where genocide is met with compensation packages, where 2.4 million deaths earn a fine. You wonder why we withdrew from your civilization. It's because you stopped being civilized centuries ago. The transmission ended. Across human space, the Dark Fleet began its journey home. They had achieved their objective. The Valthene Empire was broken, but not destroyed. They had proven that justice could be delivered without becoming the very monster you fought. On the UES Retribution, Commander Day looked at the casualty reports. Human casualties: 847 dead, 2,341 wounded. Valthene military casualties: approximately 320,000. Valthene civilian casualties: less than 4,000. Mostly from accidents or crossfire. He thought about Ember Colony. About 2.4 million people who had been given no warning, no chance, no mercy. Humanity had shown more restraint in 3 days of warfare than the Valthene had shown in 47 minutes of massacre. He hoped the galaxy was paying attention. 2 years after Ember Colony burned, President Sung Huang returned to the Galactic Assembly. His ship, the UES Unity, dropped out of hyperspace at the assembly station, but it didn't come alone. Surrounding the station were 50 human warships. They didn't power weapons or act threateningly. They just hovered there. A silent reminder of what humanity was capable of. Inside the station, the assembly chamber had been modified. Instead of the human delegation having a small podium at the edge, they now had seats equal to any other species. The chamber was packed. Every species wanted to see what the humans would say. Ambassador Hana Park entered the chamber beside President Sung and Admiral Jin. The room fell silent. Even the Rathari chairman, Kelrix, looked nervous. This emergency session will now begin, Kelrix announced. The human delegation has requested a formal trial. Alongside, murmurs rippled through the assembled ambassadors. Trials were rare in the assembly. The last one had been 3,000 years ago. Hana stood. Members of the Council, we have requested this session to address war crimes committed by humanity during the Valthene operation. We understand that our actions were illegal under assembly law. We are prepared to face justice. The chamber erupted. Several ambassadors spoke at once. The Quenix ambassador flickered confused colors. The Horth ambassador chittered in surprise. The Rathari chairman looked suspicious. Ambassador Park, are you saying humanity wishes to stand trial for your attack on the Valthene? Not exactly, Hana said. She activated a holographic display. It showed documentation dating back thousands of years. We're saying that if humanity is going to be tried for responding to genocide, then the assembly itself should be tried for enabling it. She pulled up case after case. 247 genocides in the last millennium. Every time, the assembly had done nothing meaningful. Economic sanctions that were lifted within years. Trade restrictions that had loopholes. Stern warnings that were ignored. For 10,000 years, Hana said. This assembly has operated under a simple principle. Genocide is unfortunate, but not worth fighting over. You trade with species that commit mass murder. You negotiate with them. You treat them as equals because disturbing the peace is worse than ignoring the deaths of millions. The Valthene ambassador, a new one named Drex, stood shakily. The human delegation is trying to deflect from their illegal actions. They used banned weapons. They attacked without assembly approval. We attacked because you murdered 2.4 million of our people, Hana interrupted. And this assembly offered us 15 billion credits as compensation. 6,000 credits per human life. She turned to address the entire chamber. We're not here to apologize. We're here to make sure this never happens again. To any species. President Sung stood beside her. The assembly faces a choice. You can try us for war crimes, put us on trial for using banned weapons, for attacking without approval, for all the rules we broke. But if you do that, we'll present evidence of every genocide this assembly has ignored. We'll make this a trial of the entire system. The chamber fell silent. Several ambassadors looked at each other nervously. Or, Sung continued, you can accept that the old way of doing things is over. Genocide is no longer something you handle with compensation packages. It's something that will be met with immediate military response. Admiral Jin activated another display. 17 species have approached us in the last 2 years. Species that have been victims of genocide themselves. Species who watched their colonies burn, while the assembly did nothing. They're willing to join humanity in a new coalition. The display showed the species. The Kelrin, who had lost 3 colonies to the Horth Empire. The Vesson, who had survived 2 attempted genocides by the Quenics. The Nix, the Draylen, the Korin, all young species, all scarred by attacks that the assembly had deemed not worth serious intervention. We're calling it the Ember Coalition, Jin said. Any species that commits genocide will face this coalition in battle. Not negotiation, not sanctions. Battle. The Horth ambassador, a large creature that looked like a bear made of crystals, stood angrily. This is unacceptable. You cannot threaten military action every time there's a dispute. We're not talking about disputes, Hana said coldly. We're talking about genocide. The systematic destruction of a population. If you're not planning to commit genocide, you have nothing to worry about. The Rithari chairman looked troubled. Ambassador Park, what you're proposing would fundamentally change how the assembly operates. For 10,000 years, we've maintained peace through diplomacy and economic pressure. And in those 10,000 years, how many billions have died while you maintained that peace? Hana asked. How many species have been wiped out while you negotiated? Kelrix had no answer. The debate lasted for 6 hours. Older species argued that military intervention would destabilize the entire galaxy. Younger species argued that the current system already was unstable for anyone without a powerful fleet. The Quenics ambassador suggested a compromise. Increase economic sanctions for genocide to make them more effective. Hana pulled up records showing those same sanctions had failed to prevent 90% of repeated genocides. The Valthene ambassador Drex tried to argue that humanity's attack had been disproportionate. Captain Mina Seo, now promoted to general, stood and presented the casualty figures. We destroyed 97% of your military capacity, Mina said. We killed approximately 320,000 of your soldiers. We could have killed 320 million. We could have turned your worlds into glass like you did to Ember Colony. We chose restraint. She looked directly at Drex. You murdered 2.4 million civilians in 47 minutes. We fought for 72 hours and kept your civilian casualties under 4,000. Who showed disproportionate force? Drex sat down and said nothing. Finally, after hours of debate, a vote was called. The question was simple. Should the Galactic Assembly adopt the Ember Accords, establishing genocide as a crime, requiring immediate military intervention? The vote was close. Older species mostly voted no. They didn't want to change a system that had worked for them for millennia. But younger species, those who had suffered under that system, voted yes. The final tally: 23 yes, 19 no, 3 abstentions. The Ember Accords were adopted. Under the new rules, any verified genocide would trigger an immediate coalition response. The coalition would be led by volunteer forces, with humanity and the 17 other founding species committed to participate. The assembly would provide verification and coordination, but would not be able to block action with diplomatic delays. It wasn't perfect. There were loopholes and problems that would need to be addressed, but it was a start. The Rithari chairman looked exhausted. The Ember Accords are now assembly law. May the ancestors help us all. 6 months later, Hana stood on Ember Colony. Or rather, what had been Ember Colony. The planet had been cleaned up. The radiation had been cleared. The ruins had been preserved as a memorial. And now, construction had begun on something new. The Ember Memorial Complex was being built on the site of New Sol. It would house a museum, a school, and a research center dedicated to preventing genocide. Representatives from 30 different species were working on the project. Hana walked through the construction site with Admiral Jin and General Mina. They stopped at a memorial wall that listed the names of everyone who had died in the massacre. All 2.4 million of them. Do you think it was worth it? Jin asked quietly. Hana thought about the question. The war had cost 847 human lives. The political situation was still unstable. Some species resented humanity's forceful approach. The Valthene Empire, while recovering, would probably hate humans for generations. But the Ember Accords were working. 3 months ago, when the Horth Empire had begun military operations against a Kelran colony, the coalition had mobilized immediately. The Horth had backed down without a shot being fired. The Kelran colony was safe. Yes, Hana said, it was worth it. Mina touched one name on the wall. Song Hiso. Her sister. The music teacher who had died screaming. She would have hated the violence, Mina said. She was a pacifist. She believed in art and peace and understanding. She turned to look at the construction around them. But she would have loved this. A place dedicated to making sure it never happens again. They stood in silence for a while, watching the sunset over the reconstructed world. In the distance, they could see ships landing. More volunteers. More species. All coming to help build something new. Commander Dae Kim, now an admiral himself, joined them. Ambassador. A young Valthene approached nervously. Drex, the ambassador, accompanied her. This is my daughter, Drex said quietly. She wants to work here, at the memorial, to help prevent what my people did from ever happening again. Hana looked at the young Valthene. She saw fear in the alien's eyes, but also determination. What's your name? Hana asked. Lena. The young Valthene said in careful human language. I know my people did terrible things. I know you have every reason to hate us. But I want to help. I want to make sure the next generation learns from our mistakes. Hana was silent for a long moment. Every instinct told her to say no, to send this Valthene away. This was the species that had murdered millions of humans, but that was the old way of thinking, the way that led to endless cycles of revenge. We're accepting volunteers, Hana said finally. If you're serious about this, about preventing genocide, then yes, you can work here. Lena's eyes brightened. Thank you. I won't disappoint you. After Drex and his daughter left, Admiral Jin shook his head. 2 years ago, we were at war with them. Now we're working together. That's the point, Hana said. We didn't want revenge. We wanted justice. And we wanted to make sure it wouldn't happen again. She looked back at the memorial wall, at the thousands of names carved into stone. They died because the galaxy thought genocide was just the cost of doing business. We changed that. We forced the galaxy to care, General Mina added. And we did it while staying human. We could have destroyed the Valthene. We could have committed our own genocide. But we didn't. Genocide, because that would have made us no better than them, Admiral Jin finished. The three of them stood watching the sunset. Around them, beings from dozens of species worked together to build a monument to the dead and a promise to the living. The galaxy hadn't wanted to change. The assembly had been content with its old ways, where genocide was regrettable, but not worth fighting over. Humanity had forced that change, not through diplomacy or patience, but through overwhelming force paired with unexpected mercy. They had stopped being civilized the way the assembly defined it, but in doing so, they had become something better. Hana's communicator buzzed. It was President Sung, calling from Earth. Ambassador, the assembly is formally requesting humanity's return as a full member. They're offering us a permanent seat on the council. Hana smiled. Tell them we accept, but on our terms. The Ember Accords stay in effect. Any violation, and we walk again. Already told them that, Sung said. They agreed. The transmission ended. Hana looked at her companions. Shall we head back? Jin asked. In a minute, Hana said. She walked up to the memorial wall one last time and placed her hand against it. The stone was warm from the sun. We didn't forget you, she whispered to the names. We never will. Then she turned and walked toward the future, where a galaxy had learned that humanity would not accept genocide as normal, where billions of beings might live safer lives because 2.4 million humans had died and their survivors had refused to let their deaths mean nothing. The sun set over Ember Colony, casting long shadows across the memorial. But tomorrow it would rise again on a galaxy that was, perhaps, a little bit more civilized than it had been before.